More transfer rumours and more fake outrage. You'd think we'd be used to it by now. On today's episode, we're talking Sesko, Saka, and Mbeumo, Partey, and tons more. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to the pod. Happy Monday to you all. Do you know what the best thing about today is? It's not the new rumours. It's not the beautiful, gorgeous weather that we have here in North London. It's that the kids' school holidays are over. And things are just that bit more peaceful at Casa de Symeou this morning. I know I sound like a really horrible parent for saying that, but my God, it does get a bit much, doesn't it, when you've got to entertain them every single day. God help me when the summer holidays come around. Happy Monday to everybody. Good morning to you all. Great to see lots and lots of you in the live chat with us. It's amazing to see the level of support that we get on a daily basis. So thank you again for that. Really, really do appreciate it. We've got a fair bit to get into today. We're going to talk about Bukayo Saka. We're going to talk Thomas Partey. We'll talk Bryan Mbuemo. And I've been told it's Bryan Mbuemo, not Mbeumo. Some people tell me it's Mbeumo. Some people tell me it's Mbeumo. I was told when I went to cover a Brentford game that it was Mbeumo. So that's what I'm going to go with. We're also going to talk Sesko, Gyökeres, as we seem to do on every single show. And we're going to react to those claims. You know, the claims that we all knew were coming around Arsenal's £200 million war chest. I can't believe it's taken this long for the whole war chest thing to be rolled out. But here we are. We'll react to those claims as well. We've got a lot to get into on today's pod. If I could ask you, if you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel as well. If you're new, if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. We've had a lot of reviews over the last few days, which is very, very much appreciated, but we need more. They're really, really important, particularly on Apple Podcasts. So if you haven't done so already, leave us a review over there as well. Okay, without further ado, shall we get into today's stories then? And we're going to start with Bukayo Saka, who's made the headlines and not quite for the right reasons. Okay, so let me take you back to yesterday. Spanish Grand Prix, Sunday, sun is shining. Bukayo Saka attends with his England teammates ahead of their game coming up very, very soon. And normally what happens at a Grand Prix is that someone, a reporter, will walk along the grid and he'll try and stop anybody who's anybody and get a few words out of them, a quick interview, whatever. Anyway, Bukayo Saka basically refused this interview, which is well within his bloody rights to do, yeah? And anybody who's worked as a reporter knows that if you go up to someone and you're sort of, you know, you're not pre-warning them, you're not asking them, you're not going up to do something that was pre-arranged, everybody who's worked as a reporter knows that there's a really good chance that you're going to get turned away. And initially, I hadn't seen this incident. Initially, I was just scrolling through social media when I was waiting for the charcoal to light on the barbecue because it was a nice day and I'm Greek, it had to be done. And I was scrolling through and it was Bukayo Saka, arrogant this, arrogant that. Some of it spilled into, racism, which is shocking and completely uncalled for and unnecessary and bang out of order, quite frankly. But there was a consensus online, and it was a small, but as they always tend to be, loud minority. But I thought, bloody hell, what has Bukayo Saka done here? Like, has he dropped an F-bomb? Has he said, get lost? Has he done something incredibly rude? Did they catch him at a bad moment, so much so that he's reacted and bitten and now really kind of shown himself in a negative light? So I frantically start scrolling through X, trying to find a clip of this incident, a clip of this arrogant Bukayo Saka, the Bukayo Saka who, you know, it felt really out of character, but who had obviously gone and told a reporter to do one for the reaction to be this big, only to find him just saying, I've got nothing to say, in a really calm manner. But the reaction to it was just crazy for me. It's a non-story, but I feel like we have to cover it because we have to fight Bukayo Saka's corner in this situation. Okay? Nobody who goes to watch a Grand Prix, which is what he did. He's not participating. He's not under any contractual obligations to give interviews like players are post-game or whatever. There's none of that. All he's done is said he doesn't want to give an interview. Why doesn't he want to give an interview? I'll tell you why. First of all, you're going to twist what he says. Second of all, you're going to ask him about transfers, which he won't want to comment on. And thirdly, if you ask him about Formula One, and I don't know Bukayo Saka, and I don't know how into it he is, but he might feel that he doesn't have the knowledge to give good, comprehensive answers around that sport. And so he'd rather avoid it, which is absolutely fine. And he's well within his rights to do. So this was a nonsense. I felt like I needed to talk about it because I needed to defend Bukayo Saka from some of the crap I've seen online over the last 24 hours or so. He'll be fine. He's dealt with much worse than this. He will be unaffected. I'm certain of that. But it just goes to show you, doesn't it, how quick people are nowadays to kind of create stories and to generate narratives. And you just can't escape it, man. You go and watch a Grand Prix. I know you're a person of interest. I know you're famous. I know you're on the grid. I know that that's what they do. They walk along the grid and they interview people. But for me, it was just, yeah, fine. You tried. You didn't get anywhere. You don't need to sort of make a mountain out of a molehill of it. And to be fair, it wasn't the Sky reporter or Sky that have made a big thing out of it. It was people that picked up the clip of it that was going around online and turned it into a much bigger deal than it actually is. Let's have a look through some of the comments on this. Killswitch UK says they didn't complain about Pep doing it, though, did they? No, exactly. And, you know, Bukayo wasn't the only one to turn down an interview. AJ says Harry and his barbecues. Razor says charcoal barbecue, the only way. Nice, Harry. Mate, people that do barbecues with gas, and I'm sorry if this is any of you, shouldn't be allowed. That's not a barbecue. You might as well cook on your cooker inside. What's the difference? No way am I accepting gas barbecues as real barbecues. Inspired Channel says, wait until they say it was Arteta who told him to say that. Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine? Rob says Saka had every reason to say no to an interview. Perhaps he didn't have much knowledge on F1 and didn't want to get drawn. It's right out of order the way he's been treated. Exactly. Joel says he broke the golden rule, Harry. You must be available for an interview on the F1 grid. Look, I get that a lot of people do it, but there shouldn't be a problem with not doing it, is my kind of point. What else have we got? Tom Hines agrees with me. He says gas barbecues are just ovens. Exactly. They're outdoor ovens. I completely agree. Breaking news, says Luke. Harry rudely discounts gas barbecue cooks. I'll stand by that. I stand by that 100%. And Hacker says, sorry, I know we're chatting a lot about barbecues. I know there's people that don't care, but it's a really important subject to me. Hacker says, charcoal cooks too unevenly. That's because you don't know how to cook it. If you light your charcoal properly, spread it properly, there's no reason for it to cook unevenly. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. Bukayo Saka, I don't want to hear that narrative being sort of peddled around about him because he's not arrogant. He's probably one of the most approachable people in the sport, one of the most humble people in the sport. And anything said about him to the contrary is quite clearly a nonsense and an agenda driven. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to talk Thomas Partey. Okay, Thomas Partey has been, as far as we're aware, locked in talks with Arsenal since the end of the season over a new deal. It's quite clear that Arsenal would like to keep the player on at least for another year, maybe with an additional year option on the end of that or whatever. We don't know the ins and outs of it just yet. But I think it was part of Arsenal's plan to try and keep a hold of Thomas Partey while, of course, bringing in Martin Zubimendi. I think that makes sense for a number of reasons. It means that, you know, with Zubimendi coming in, you can have him sort of be sort of eased into the role and he can adapt to English football, his new surroundings, all the rest of it. You know, he can basically go into life at Arsenal without that same pressure that he would have if both Thomas Partey and Jorginho were to leave. So we know that Arsenal are interested in doing this. We know that Thomas Partey is interested in staying because those talks have been ongoing. But from what we're reading at the moment, it appears that so far there has been no breakthrough between Thomas Partey's people and Arsenal Football Club. Now, I'm not going to say that this is at a critical point and I'm really concerned about it just yet. But the more I think about this, the more I think if he leaves, we're going to have to change our summer recruitment plans again. And, people will argue that maybe behind the scenes, Arsenal are already open to the possibility of him leaving and have already lined something up. But for those of you that are sitting there on a daily basis, sort of reading all these rumors and going, well, we only need to bring in a left winger, a centre forward, and maybe a goalkeeper, and saying that means that we're fine to spend 75, 80 million quid on each of those two forward positions. If we then need to go out and bring in another good midfield player, that significantly takes away from what we're able to spend elsewhere. So for me, it's really, really important that Thomas Partey stays. Now, the reason this has been brought up today and the reason we're discussing it now is because A, we've had reports that there's been no breakthrough, but B, we've heard that Barcelona have opened talks with the midfielders camp. Now, it's difficult to read right now what exactly this is. Is this a serious, concrete interest from Barcelona? Or is this Thomas Partey's agents posturing, trying to get an offer? Have they gone and offered their player to Barcelona to kind of gauge what they'd be willing to pay so that they can potentially use that as a bargaining chip in their negotiations with Arsenal? The truth is, guys, we don't know. But obviously, reading that Thomas Partey is linked to Barcelona, it has caused some concern, because if Barcelona are willing to give him, for instance, a longer contract, because I think we can be competitive with Barcelona salary-wise, I'm not massively concerned by that. But I do worry, do we end up losing Thomas Partey and then having to go out and bring in another high-value midfield player, which then significantly eats into our budget elsewhere? The war chest, will be kind of half empty if we have to do that before we even get to the striker thing. So I am a bit worried about this, but at the same time, there is a really, really good chance that this is his agents. This is agent chat. This is being driven in order to try and get Thomas Partey the best possible deal that he could get at Arsenal. All the previous reporting tells us that his priority is to stay, that Arsenal's priority is for him to stay. So I'm still hopeful that this gets done, but obviously Barcelona coming into the mix is a little bit of a cause for concern. So just keep your eyes on that one. Let's move on. We're going to talk another Premier League player who Arsenal continue to be linked with and who was mentioned by Fabrizio Romano just yesterday, actually. Fabrizio Romano mentioned that Arsenal are one of the clubs currently interested in Brentford star Bryan Mbuemo. We've talked about him before. He's got a really, really impressive record. I've really admired the way he kind of took on the mantle at Brentford after Ivan Toney left and just stepped in and went, I'm going to be the guy, and has literally been that guy. And, he's been really, really key to their sort of decent season. By their standards, I think it's a really decent season. There were never really any questions about their survival in the Premier League, which I think for Brentford is a great place to be. But again, I go back to a conversation that we had previously where I talked about his suitability to Arsenal. And I don't really know whether he is the guy that we should be going after, just because of one reason, really. It's not that I don't rate the player. I do. I think he's good. I think he's proven he can do it in our league. He's proven he can do it in a much lesser team. But A, there's the, is he better off being a big fish in a small pond theory? And B, it's quite clear when you look at Bryan Mbuemo and his body of work and you watch highlights and compilations and look at the stats and underlying numbers, he does his best work coming in off that right-hand side. He's not going to take Bukayo Saka's position. That simply isn't going to happen. So in which case, is spending what's probably going to be 50, 60 million pounds on Bryan Mbuemo, just judging by the noises coming out of Brentford, is that the best use of funds given the needs that Arsenal have right now? I personally am not sure it is. So this is not one I'm hugely on board with. But, we know that Andrea Berta likes to check all of his options, likes to be well aware of what's going on in the market, likes to understand who's available, who's not. So, it could be true that there is an interest there, that Arsenal have expressed some kind of interest, that they're considering a move for the player. But whether that develops into anything more, it remains to be seen. So I'm not sitting here saying we're going to sign Bryan Mbuemo, or even at this stage that it's likely. But it was interesting that we were mentioned among the clubs who have an interest in the player. Right, we're going to take a short pause. When we come back, we've got 2 more stories to cover off, and we're going to take your thoughts and questions from the live chat. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. All of that stuff really, really does help. And if you'd like to go one further, you can sign up to our Patreon page, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. Not only do you get access to exclusive content, to become part of our community, direct chat with me and all the rest of it, but you also get all of these episodes ad-free, which I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate. So go over to patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below, and sign up should you wish. Not compulsory, but for those that do, I really, really appreciate it. Right, short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Sesko, we're going to talk Gyökeres, surprise, and we're going to discuss the £200 million war chest.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Like and subscribe. Okay, let's talk Benjamin Sesko and Victor Gyökeres. Look, over the last couple of weeks, we've gone from, and I keep saying this because it's so true. We've gone from Gyökeres is the one, we're moving for him, Sesko's too expensive, to actually there's a deal to be done for Sesko. Let's do that. That's our priority. Back to no, let's go with Victor Gyökeres. Back to let's go with Benjamin Sesko. And at the back end of last week, we heard that Arsenal had opened talks over Benjamin Sesko, which I think for a lot of people made them feel that that was the way that we were going and the way that we were heading, including me in that. Over the course of the weekend, we have had reports claiming that we're in chat. We're in talks, chats. Who am I talking to here? My 6-year-old son. We're in talks with Benjamin Sesko. But there's also been reports coming out of Portugal that we're in talks with Victor Gyökeres. And that has prompted some conversations within the Arsenal sphere of, well, is it possible that we get both? I can tell you that I think it's incredibly unlikely that we would sign both. I think it's very much one or the other. And who that player will be, we're not sure just yet. If you think about it, though, we've had a lot of links, as you'd imagine, at this time of year. And with a club of our profile and our size and fan base and online presence, you're always going to get these rumors coming up because they generate clicks, they generate traffic, and that's ultimately the name of the game, right? But you think about it, Sesko, Gyökeres, throwing Mbeumo into the mix today, who we've been talking about, it does kind of lean into the idea that Andrea Berta very much is someone that will go and talk to lots and lots of players, gauge their interest in potentially moving to Arsenal, try and understand from the selling club what they'd be looking for. And then what he has done in the past, according to people that know far more than me, is gone back to the club, his club that is, and presented those options with as much information with regards to what it's going to take financially and what it's going to take in terms of convincing the player, that this is the right place for him. He's known to go back to his club and say, right, these are the options. What do we want to do? Where are we moving? How are we navigating this? So factoring all of that in, I'm not going to get too bogged down on whether it's Sesko or Gyökeres right now. I'm not going to get invested in either one of them because I really do think that there's a possibility that we go for either one. We could end up with either player. We could end up with neither player. We could end up with someone completely different, completely left field. I haven't asked the club about this, about Sesko, about Gyökeres. I haven't. And the reason I haven't is because I don't think I'm going to get anything back in terms of yes or no. I think it would be very much not a denial at this stage, but a distancing from these stories. I think is how the club would handle it right now, because obviously negotiations, in order to be as effective as possible, need to be private. The minute these things become public, the harder it is to do the deal, because then once as a football club, you've gone out there and your stance is known and very, very clear, you end up in a situation, right, where everybody knows now that you're trying to get that player, and almost at times you can be forced into maybe paying a little bit more or accepting things in the negotiation that you wouldn't normally, because you don't want the embarrassment of being linked with X player throughout the summer, only to end up empty-handed or with, egg on your faces. So it's really, really interesting the way this stuff works. But I'm just going by what we know about Berta previously. I think there is a good chance that he's going out there speaking to all different players, trying to gauge and understand where they're at. And then there will probably be some sort of meeting at Arsenal whereby we look through those options and we think, right, okay, who are we going to make that move for? Now, obviously, the transfer window is officially open now, but it closes on the 10th, and then it's closed for the duration of the Club World Cup before it reopens again. So it's quite interesting, because a lot of people will say, well, the window's open now, we need to act, and we need to act fast. I personally don't think there'll be a huge urgency to get any deals done in this first phase of the summer window. I think everybody's pretty relaxed. Everybody's pretty calm. The plan is clear in terms of what we need. Who that means we sign, I think, is still up in the air a little bit. I think there'll be targets, obviously, but I think, these conversations, these initial conversations are, as much as anything else, to establish what's possible and what's not. And I think the next phase, and I know people hate it when we talk about phases, or the next stage in the recruitment process, let's use that word instead, is to then go and try and execute the deals that we think are the right ones. So, yeah, not surprised to continuously hear us linked with multiple forward players. I think that's very much going to be the story of the summer. So don't get too carried away, but equally don't get too frustrated when it feels like things are going a little bit slower than we'd like. Final story I want to touch on today, before I take some of your questions and thoughts from the live comments. So start getting them in if you haven't done so already. Kieran Maguire, financial football expert, has told the BBC that Arsenal can spend £200 million based on their financial results. I don't know if that takes into consideration the UEFA restrictions. When I was on TalkSport in the January window, I went quite big on the fact that, in my view, Arsenal really, really did need to go out and invest. And when I did a bit of digging to figure out, what was possible and what wasn't, the thing that was presented to me when going and inquiring about that was these UEFA regulations. They're a lot tighter than the FFP ones. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to understand the ins and outs of all of these things. I'm certainly no financial expert. It's why I left banking to do this. But look, I think all I'll say is don't put a figure in your mind and obsess over it, right? So don't go 200 million, right? Then if we only spend 180, don't then go, but we had 200. Because I think these figures are very fluid, and they depend and they change and they look different by the day based on so many different factors. If we can make some sales over the course of the summer and we can bolster what we're able to spend, I think that would be great, because there's a few players within our group, players that have been out on loan, etc., that I think it's probably time that we moved on from. Equally, though, I don't expect to get major money for those players. So you've got to temper your expectations there too. But yeah, 200 million is the figure being talked about. That's what the war chest is said to contain this time around. But all I'll say is I don't know whether or not that that takes into context UEFA's regulations as well as the Premier League's ones. And it's really, really important that you comply with UEFA's ones. Otherwise, you can't play in UEFA competition. And who doesn't want to play in UEFA competition? So yeah, that's the final story of the day. That was Kieran Maguire telling the BBC that. So yeah, interesting. Something I'll certainly bear in mind. But he's looking at it from a very sort of simple viewpoint of And I know he understands finances really well and stuff. When I say simple, I don't mean to like discredit what he's saying or what he's doing. My point is, I don't know how in depth he's gone here. I don't know if he's just looked at their FFP stuff and gone, okay, that means they've got about 200 million quid of wiggle room, or if he's factored that in plus the UEFA stuff plus whatever else. So let's see what happens over the course of the summer. Right, time for your questions and time for your thoughts. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Okay, guys, let's check where we're at in terms of likes right now. Only 130, but there's over 750 of you with me live right now. Come on, let's try and get to 1,000 likes on all of our videos. That would be amazing. I'd even take 500, man. Like, I'm slacking in the like department. Maybe I don't. Well, some of you will tell me that I ask too much, but maybe I don't do enough of it because I'm not getting the results. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, of course. And let's go over to the live chat box and take some of your questions and thoughts. Right, what have we got? Sally Hughes says, could it be that if Partey leaves, Havertz becomes part of the midfield and we sign Gyökeres and Sesko? Rice and Zubi could share the 6 role. Then we can play 4-4-2 sometimes with 2 strikers. I think personally, and this is just my opinion, it's not based on any knowledge. I'm not reporting this, basically. This is just my opinion. I think that Kai Havertz will play as a centre forward a fair bit still. But I think also he will be considered as a midfield option. I think there's a world in which Miles Lewis-Skelly is considered as a midfield option as well. Once, hopefully Ricardo Calafiori can put his fitness problems behind him. Also, if Ben White's back and you've got Jurrien Timber available, he can play left back as well. All of a sudden, that versatility thing becomes really, really important. So I don't know that Havertz will become solely a part of the midfield, but I think he is seen and viewed as a midfield option, as he has been from day one since coming to Arsenal. I still think it's incredibly unlikely, though, that we sign Gyökeres and Sesko. I just can't see it with all the other positions that we need to address. And I do like the idea of us playing a 4-4-2 sometimes. And that's not completely alien to Mikel, by the way. We've seen our team in the past sort of set up in that shape when we're pressing, when we're in certain phases of the game. You've seen Odegaard go up with the centre forward press as a 2, and then it becomes a kind of flat 4 in midfield. I quite like it at times. I think there's certain games where it works and it really suits. And yeah, having that versatility means you have flexibility. And with flexibility, you can hopefully play different systems in different shapes and do them very, very effectively. Wes Bird says, Harry, don't you feel this transfer window needs to be really strong, bringing in elite players, not only to show our position we're serious, but more importantly, to show our current players our ambitions? Yeah, I think all of that stuff is important. And I think we're in a period where we're trying to get a lot of our key players to sign new contracts. And the transfer window, I think, probably has a pretty big bearing on that. If you look at the business Arsenal are doing and you think that's good business and that's the kind of business that is going to enable us to get over the line and achieve what we're hoping to achieve, then you're certainly much more inclined, aren't you, to stay at the club for sure. For sure. Right, let's go through. Let's take a few more. Ayan says, what do you think should be Arsenal's priority order for signings position-wise, considering Partey and Trossard are staying and Zubimendi's done? Well, we don't know for sure that either of those 2 players are staying. If I had to guess, I'd say they will, but just to be clear, that those are not done deals just yet. Zubimendi, it sounds like it's a done deal, but until I see a picture of him in an Arsenal shirt, I'm going to be a little bit wary, maybe because of those constant reports that keep coming out and scaring the shit out of us with regards to Real Madrid still circling around him. Obviously, he's got a relationship with Xabi Alonso, which fuels that and adds to that as well. But in terms of priority, I think centre forward first. I think left winger second. I think goalkeeper third. And then if we could get one more in, I'd be quite content with that. I wouldn't be surprised if we brought in another defender. I know people are going to lose their minds about that and say, oh, Mikel does is bring in defenders. But he's losing Tierney. He clearly can't rely on Tomiyasu anymore, fitness-wise. He's seen White struggle last season. He's seen Timber struggle towards the end of the season because he was just too heavily relied upon. I think he might look at bringing in a defender if he gets all his priority business done first. Sniper says, what do we do now on the left wing? Reports that Rodrigo is staying and Leao is being expensive as well as not for sale. Look, it's disappointing that it seems that Rodrigo is going to stay at Real Madrid, but it's not a complete surprise, is it? Like, new manager comes in, he clearly made a bit of a fuss, caused a bit of a stink. Maybe he's going to get a better contract. Maybe he's going to have a more defined and stronger role. He's got a defined and strong role in that team, but maybe one that he believes in a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know how Xabi Alonso is going to use him exactly. Rafael Leao, I got to be honest, as someone that watches a lot of Serie A football, frustrates the living daylights out of me. 1 minute he's unplayable and unstoppable, and the next minute he's useless. And maybe useless is too strong a term, but he just blows so hot and cold. I'm not sure I'd go and spend big money on Rafael Leao. And while if the price was right, I might be tempted to take some sort of gamble and roll the dice on him. The price isn't going to be right because Milan value him so highly, which makes that a complete and utter no-go for me. Sean says, would Rodrigo, Sesko, and Zubimendi be a window you'd be happy with? Yeah, I think so. I know there'll be people that say no, but like, what are you realistically expecting? Guitar Solo says, why would Arsenal spend £200 million in the summer? It's not like we are rebuilding. This would reek of overcorrecting. No, I don't think so. I think that when you look at the positions that we need to recruit in this summer, most of us agree that centre forward and left wing are the two areas that we really want to improve in. Those are probably two of, if not the most expensive positions. In fact, they are. Centre forward, someone who's going to bring you goals, and a winger that's hopefully going to bring you goals or create you goals. They're going to be the most expensive players out there. There's no question about that. So you're probably going to get close to 150 million just signing those two players. So 200 million doesn't seem or isn't as bad as it may initially sound. Shelby says, don't you think Arteta shouldn't be picking his players anymore, given his track record being poor, especially in the forward department? It's not poor. Gabriel Jesus came in at the beginning and elevated Arsenal to a whole new level. Kai Havertz has done a really competent job at centre forward. I'm not having anybody say he's been a bad signing. People put so much pressure on him from the beginning and are waiting for him to flop because they didn't agree with it in the first place. So much so that they undervalue him. Look at the difference. Arsenal with Havertz versus Arsenal without Havertz. Tells you everything you need to know. And then Saka was already there. Martinelli was already there. Leandro Trossard, for what we paid for him, has been a really good recruit. I don't think he's got it wrong at all. I think if you wanted to criticize him about forward signings, you'd say that he hasn't made enough. Not that the ones he has made have been a car crash. I think that's really, really harsh. And actually unfair. I really do believe that. Gary says, Harry, do you think we should go for a winger from abroad, considering the prices being quoted for Mitoma and João Pedro, etc.? I think 70 million is way too much for either of those two. Yeah, I just don't think you should buy from Brighton. I think Brighton are just, ridiculous in their valuations at times. And I think they've been emboldened to be able to kind of feel that they're sort of entitled to go out and demand these prices because idiots like Todd Bowley have been like, okay, well, you want 100, we'll give you 100, no problem. You want 70, we'll give you 70. No one else buys from Brighton at those prices, just Chelsea. So, I think that's kind of emboldened them and put them in a place where they now believe that they can go out and sell players for crazy amounts of money when that shouldn't be the case. Okay, guys, I'm going to take one more and then I'm going to sign out. What have we got? Rumble says, I personally realistically expect world-class players in year 6, Harry. Yeah, and, we might get world-class players. We don't know what we're going to do yet, man. If we sign Rodrigo, for example, look, I know the reports, the latest ones are sort of quite clear in that he's probably going to stay at Real Madrid. But imagine we were to get that deal done. He's world-class. There's no question about that. Listen, if the window is underwhelming, and I hope it isn't because we've had a few of them in the last year or so. We've had 2 of them in the last year. Then I'll be the first to say it. But let's not be upset about the window before we even have a clue what we're doing. I think that's the way to look at it. Big shout out to Trev. How you doing, mate? He says, what do you think the chances of signing Nico Williams or Eze are? What do I think of the chance of signing Nico Williams? I think there is a chance we sign Nico Williams because there's been a long-standing interest, but I think Arsenal are wanting to look around, do their due diligence first, because I think as much as they like the player, they do feel, this is just a hunch, that the price point is high in terms of the transfer, but more so than that, the wages is going to be the big issue and the big problem. On Eze, there's a pretty big release clause. I think it's about 70 mil. Again, I talked about it yesterday. I got so much stick for this in the comments. I really like Eberechi Eze. I really, really do. But he's not an out-and-out winger, is he? So if you bring him in, you're bringing him in to come either infield from those wide positions, which then takes away some of your width, or you're bringing him in as one of the midfield. I'm fine with that as long as you do the other business that you need to do first, because I just don't see a left-sided 8 as being the number one priority right now, which is where I think in our team, Eze would probably do his best work. That's in our team. You can stick him out on the left. Some people say that that's the right thing to do. Maybe it is, but for me, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that you'd be getting the best out of Ebere Eze, playing him out there. Okay, guys, I am going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on this Monday morning. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. Can we get to 500 likes by the time the stream ends? I'd be very, very grateful. Keep the likes coming. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Leave us a review on Apple, Spotify. Sign up on Patreon if you wish. And I will speak to you all on the next one, which will be tomorrow, unless there's some major breaking news. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful Monday and up the Arsenal. Goodbye.